Have you ever wished that you could take your childhood car and turn it into the car you always dreamed it could be? Well, that's what we're going to be doing here with a brand new project on Reignited. Now, I think you guys would all agree that nostalgia plays a big part in our lives, right? As we get older, we start hankering for the way that things used to be, a much simpler lifestyle, a more carefree lifestyle. And our first car, or one of our early cars, is a big part of that. We start thinking about how much fun we had with that vehicle, maybe some of the things we learned while we were working on that vehicle, and it just reminds us of that period of time in our life, and we want to kind of go back to that a little bit as best we can, kind of recapture that spirit. Now, I'm no different than anybody else. I feel the exact same way, and I have a lot of nostalgia over one of my early cars. Now, this was not my first car, but it is the car that I really cut my teeth on and learned a lot of mechanical stuff that I otherwise thought I would never be able to do, and I was very proud of myself for learning to do these things. Now, I'm talking about things like I changed my first timing belt on this car, I installed my first aftermarket upgraded clutch, I installed my first aftermarket camshaft, I took apart the transmission and installed a limited slip differential, something I never thought I would do. I built my first turbo kit on this vehicle, and eventually later on I built my first supercharger kit. So all of these things really laid a foundation for me in my later career as a professional mechanic, but it also laid a foundation for my love of one, fabrication, and two, modification of vehicles. So a little while back, I started to have the seed of an idea in my mind. Now, this isn't always a good thing with me, as my ideas are oftentimes dumb and outlandish, but I started thinking, what if I could take that childhood car and get rid of everything I didn't like about it, but make it into the car that I always wished it could have been back when I was younger. Now, it's been near 20 years since that time. I don't have a lot more money to spend on it, but I do have a lot of skills that my younger self would never have been capable of.
I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
Well, are you guys ready to see the car I'm talking about? I can guarantee you it's not this one. Yes, of course, we are talking here about the mighty Dodge Neon. Now just take a look at this powerhouse engine in here. This is a single overhead cam engine producing 132 horsepower. And that's literally all I can say about it because it is so boring. Everything about this engine bay is so boring. So technically, the Neon that I had when I was younger was a 1996 first generation Neon. It was a 2-door, 5-speed manual, but it was an excellent base to work off of. And I say base for good reason because it was such a base model that it didn't even come with a passenger side mirror. Rather, there was a block-off plate where the mirror should go, and that was straight from the factory. Don't ask me how they got that into production, but that's what it was. Now, the reason that I have this third generation Neon is because if you were a Neon guy back in the day, the car we all lusted after was the SRT4 Neon. That car, in fact, they didn't call it a Neon, they just called it an SRT4, but it's like calling a Mazda Miata an MX-5. We all know it's a Miata, we all know it's a Neon, right? But that was the car we all lusted after, the SRT4, because man, that thing was turbocharged, had some great ground effects to it. Man, what a cool looking car and really fast right from the factory. So if the SRT4 is the one I really want, why did I get just this base model 3rd gen Neon? So we're talking about nostalgia in this episode, and you know how certain songs can maybe take you back to a certain period of time in your life, or certain smells will just strike a memory in your mind? Come here, I want you to listen to this. Listen to the sound this hood makes when it latches. Now that sound is quintessential Neon, and it immediately takes me back to all of my years working on these in the past. Now I could have started with an SRT4, but that's not the goal of this project. The goal of this project is to build the ultimate Dodge Neon, and as good as the SRT4 is and was, it's still not the ultimate Neon. I want to build what Dodge should have built to begin with. Let's take a look at what engine we're going to use on this project. Ta-da! Wait a minute. No, this is the one for our twin charge Magnum project. No, this isn't the right one. That would be awesome though, right? Now, in a move that surprises absolutely nobody, yes, we are indeed putting a Hemi engine into our Dodge Neon. Now, this engine is a SRT Scatpack 6.4 liter, making 470 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds of torque. Now, we are going to pair that with a manual transmission. Now, this is the exact same transmission I'm running in my C10 out of an 08 Chevy Colorado. I thrashed on that thing with a 6.4 and it holds up just fine, so I'm going to use the exact same setup on this vehicle. Now I also have a Hellcat Red Eye rear differential here. I want to put an independent rear diff in this car. So obviously Here's the big news. This car is going rear wheel drive. That is my primary thing of fixing one of the failings of these cars. My personal Neon that I had, I was making somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 260, 270 horsepower, somewhere around there. And even at that relatively low number, it was torque steering like crazy. You couldn't go around the corner with it because you'd stab the gas and it would just plow right off the road. It was very frustrating and basically one of the reasons why I eventually got rid of the car. We're gonna solve that. We're gonna make this thing rear wheel drive and we're going to put a stupid amount of horsepower behind it. So as you guys can see, while the SRT4 Neon was a great car, I'm looking to build the world's first Scatpack Neon. Now the plan aesthetically for this vehicle is to make it look like an SRT4 Neon. Get the front bumper, rear bumper, side skirts, potentially the rear wing. I'm not sure about that. Sometimes I like them better without the rear wing. I'll give you guys a couple of looks here on screen now as to what the final visuals could be like.
This is your basic layout of the car, and that's pretty much what it could look like when it's finished.
Kind of what I'm envisioning for this vehicle. But I can already hear you guys thinking right now, how in the world are you going to fit that Hemi engine into that little tiny car? And the truth is, I actually have no idea. I've been running some numbers, actually doing some measurements on it, and truthfully, it looks like I'm probably gonna have to move the firewall back a fair bit if I don't want the engine to stick out like 7 or 8 inches above the hood, which is not what I want. I want something more of a stock exterior aesthetic to it. I really don't want it to be super obnoxious, but we're gonna have to see what we can do. Now your second question, how on earth are you going to make this thing not twist up like a pretzel? Well, my primary plan as of this moment is I'm going to cut out most of the floor here and actually run some twin chassis rails right down the center of the vehicle that'll support both the engine all the way back to the rear suspension subframe, because all that rear suspension is going to go away. And I'm basically going to try to implement or basically install a factory subframe from like a Magnum or a 300 or a Challenger Charger, something like that. A whole entire subframe assembly that actually bolts up to a frame that I'm going to build, because I just think there's a lot of modular ability there. Now that obviously that'll change my track width. This is all stuff to think about way down the road, but that's the general idea behind it. And I do want to go with an independent rear suspension because the idea behind this car is I kind of want to make it a grip driving car. I want to go ahead and fully cage this thing, something I've never done before, so that's something I want to achieve as well. But I just think that this car, when it's all done, having some massive tires out back with a nice throaty rumble exhaust, I think that's just going to be absolutely fantastic. You guys have got to let me know, what do you think of this project? Are you into this project or not? Please let me know in the comments down below. Now, right about now, I'm sure a lot of you are saying, why would you take that amazing engine and put it in such a terrible car? Well, I'd love to tell you that when I was younger, I was mobbing around in a clapped out old Mopar, and that's what I was rebuilding now, but I didn't. I grew up with a Dodge Neon, so therefore that's where my nostalgia lays. That's why I'm putting it in this car. And in fact, so many of my really cherished memories and important things that happened to me in my life happened while I was either driving or during the time I owned my Neon. So that's why it means so much to me. And it's funny, even just starting this project, so many of these memories are starting to come back to me. In fact, one of the things I used to do with my Neon is I would drive it to my local drag strip, which was 2 hours away. And sometimes, every now and then, I'd be able to get my dad to come with me. And I remember vividly one time, I was able to win the whole class. And I remember he was so excited for me. And that was just a great memory that I have. Now, also, too, another cherished memory of mine is that I actually proposed to my wife while we were in my Dodge Neon. And here now, almost 18 years later, I literally cannot think of a more romantic way to propose to your wife than doing so in a Dodge Neon. You can ask her, she feels the same way.
Literally the worst proposal and the worst car.
See, it's just as special to her as it is to me. Now, I was digging through some old photos of stuff that I had, and I actually found some old Polaroids. Yes, I said Polaroids of me when I actually had my Dodge Neon. Now, here's me when I won my trophies from winning my class while drag racing. And this photo, I'm working in my parents' garage. I had the engine out at the time. I believe I'm working on my turbo kit at that time. That's when I was building that. You may or may not tell that that's where my obsession with lighting came from, is working in kind of a cave like that. Sorry, Dad, but that garage was so dimly lit. It was absolutely horrible. Now I'm obsessed with lighting, and it has to be as bright as it can be. Now, of course, with the benefit of age and experience, it's easy for me to look back on that time period in my life and realize that, yes, in fact, the Dodge Neon is a terrible car. But that's okay, we're gonna fix all that by building the ultimate Dodge Neon and have a car that young me would have been over the moon to own. Now, as far as timeline goes, we are still heavily involved in working on our twin-charged Magnum. That is the 05 Dodge Magnum RT that we are both supercharging and turbocharging. That's happening on the channel right now, so you can go watch that playlist if you want to and see where we're at with that. So we're still going to be working on that. But if we have lulls here and there where we're waiting on parts, we'll be switching over to work on this thing, and then we'll be working on this project full time as soon as the Magnum is up and running. But that is going to be it for this particular episode, you guys. We'll see you next time on Reignited.
This proposal was beyond epic proportions of sadness. A proposal any mother would have been ashamed of. Yeah, let's buy the ring on my credit. But you should probably propose to me. How about tonight in your car in the snow? Okay.